All right, let's get right into it. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking an absolutely monumental diplomatic event, the historic May 2026 summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing. And look, this is not just your standard diplomatic meet and greet. We're talking about a high-stakes geopolitical chess match happening right in the middle of massive global upheaval. What goes down in these closed-door meetings is going to have profound, lasting consequences for the global economy, for technology, and for international security. So let's cut through all the noise and take a hard look at exactly what's on the table.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the 2026 Beijing summit itself, then rewind to the trade war backdrop. From there, we'll break down exactly what the U.S. wants, followed by what China wants, and finally, we'll wrap up with the global ripple effect.
So, Section 1. The 2026 Beijing Summit. High stakes in Beijing. Now, it's worth noting that this is actually the first state visit by a U.S. president to China in nearly a decade, and it's happening against the backdrop of a global energy shock and an ongoing war in Iran. Both of these leaders are acutely aware of their own vulnerabilities right now. But President Trump didn't travel to Beijing alone. Just look at the passenger manifest for Air Force One. He brought a powerhouse delegation of corporate executives. We're talking Elon Musk of Tesla and SpaceX, Tim Cook, who's in his final months over at Apple, and Jensen Huang of NVIDIA. Bringing these heavy hitters brilliantly illustrates just how deeply intertwined corporate interests are with these diplomatic talks. These tech titans have massive supply chains and market interests in China, which really proves that you literally cannot separate the economic issues from the security issues in this relationship. It's all connected.
Which brings us to Section 2, the trade war backdrop, escalation to 2026.
To truly grasp the weight of today's summit, we kind of have to look backward at this escalating economic friction. As we trace this timeline, you'll see this wasn't just some sudden falling out, right? It's the result of years of mounting tariffs and shifting global supply chains. Back in 2018, during his first term, Trump initiated the trade war, citing unfair practices and intellectual property theft. We got a pretty tense Phase 1 deal in 2020. Then, the Biden administration came in and largely kept those tariffs in place, even adding a few. But look at early 2025, a massive escalation under the second Trump administration. The U.S. slapped a staggering 145% tariff on Chinese goods, and China fired right back with 125% tariffs on American goods. That is huge. It wasn't until the Busan summit in October 2025 that we finally saw a temporary truce involving tariffs and rare earth minerals, and that truce directly paved the way for the May 2026 summit we're analyzing today.
Moving right along to Section 3, what the U.S. wants, Trump's objectives.
And right alongside that, Section 4. What China wants, Xi's objectives. So when we objectively look at the bargaining chips here, it's clear both leaders have vastly different priorities. The U.S. is eyeing those upcoming midterm elections, so they desperately need tangible deliverables to prove their aggressive tariff strategy actually worked. They're pushing for China to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz, they want major Chinese purchases of American agriculture and energy, and they're demanding a strict crackdown on fentanyl. China, on the flip side, is looking for stability and validation of its stature on the world stage. Xi Jinping wants relief from those punishing tariffs, the establishment of a board of investment to match a U.S.-backed board of trade, and, this is a big one, crucial access to advanced AI semiconductors. It's basically a giant, complex puzzle of gives and takes, where yielding on one issue might be traded for a massive win on another.
So what exactly are they discussing when the doors close? Well, sources indicate the summit is completely dominated by these 5 critical flashpoints: the Iran war, Taiwan, artificial intelligence, the broader trade and tariff war, and the fentanyl crisis. We're going to break down each of these right now to understand exactly what is at stake.
But before we hit that first flashpoint, we really need to understand the overarching mood in the room. Right at the start of the summit, President Xi explicitly referenced the Thucydides trap. As you can see here, this is the historical theory that when a rising power threatens to displace an established power, the result is often war. By bringing this up right out of the gate, Xi is openly acknowledging the deep underlying geopolitical anxiety of this entire meeting. The shared goal, ideally, is to prove this theory wrong and avoid the trap altogether.
Okay, flashpoint 1, the Iran war and the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. is extremely eager for Beijing to lean on Tehran to advance peace talks. Why? Because the U.S. is struggling with the conflict, and they know China has real leverage. Roughly half of China's crude oil imports pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, while China's massive petroleum stockpiles have somewhat shielded them from the initial shock, they absolutely want that waterway unblocked. If it stays closed, we're looking at a global recession that would completely devastate China's export markets.
And actually, the recent visit by Iran's foreign minister to Beijing highly suggests China is actively positioning itself as a broker here.
Flashpoint 2 is Taiwan. This is perhaps the most sensitive topic of all. The U.S. posture is highly assertive right now. President Trump recently authorized an unprecedented $11 billion arms package for Taiwan, even though shipments have been delayed. China's posture, meanwhile, is deeply defensive. Beijing considers the self-ruled island a breakaway province and adamantly demands the U.S. halt these arms sales entirely. China might even push the U.S. to formally state it opposes Taiwan independence, which is a big shift from the traditional U.S. stance of simply not supporting it.
To really grasp how serious this is, just look at this stark warning from Xi Jinping to Donald Trump. Read that last line. Peace across the Taiwan Strait is irreconcilable as fire and water with Taiwan independence. State media made sure to broadcast this quote during the summit, emphasizing the immense gravity of the Taiwan issue. For Beijing, you have to understand this isn't just another trade dispute, it's a fundamental red line. If it gets crossed, the entire bilateral relationship goes up in smoke.
Flashpoint 3 brings us right back to those tech titans flying on Air Force One. We are right in the middle of an artificial intelligence Cold War. The U.S. has accused China of stealing intellectual property to fuel its AI labs. Because of that, Washington has heavily restricted companies like NVIDIA from exporting their absolute most advanced processing chips, like the highly sought-after H200, to China. Beijing is immensely frustrated by this and is using the summit to aggressively push for eased curbs on advanced semiconductors, because frankly, those chips are the lifeblood of the modern digital economy.
Flashpoint 4 covers the actual mechanics of the trade war itself. There's this fascinating, almost cyclical nature to how these two countries weaponize trade. Step 1, the U.S. imposes massive tariffs. Step 2, China doesn't just match those tariffs. They play their own unique cards by blocking exports of rare earth minerals and magnets, which are absolutely critical components for U.S. weapons and tech. Step 3, the economic pain becomes mutual, leading to temporary suspensions, like that 2025 Busan deal we talked about. It's just a constant, high-stakes recalibration of leverage.
And then we have Flashpoint 5, the fentanyl crisis. This is a massive priority for the Trump administration, particularly for his domestic political base. The U.S. accuses Chinese businesses of supplying the chemical precursors to Mexican cartels to manufacture fentanyl. So the U.S. wants a strict, verifiable crackdown. China, meanwhile, wants to be officially removed from the U.S. State Department's annual list of major drug transit or illicit drug-producing countries. It's a classic example where domestic politics and international diplomacy just crash right into each other.
Which takes us to our final section, the global ripple effect. The spectators.
See, while Trump and Xi are sitting at the table in Beijing, the entire world is basically watching through the window, holding its breath. For countries in the Indo-Pacific region, analysts note they are desperately seeking what they call a Goldilocks U.S.-China relationship. They don't want it too hot, meaning they desperately want to avoid a military conflict or a crushing economic war that forces them to take sides. But they also don't want it too cold, or rather too close. They really fear a dominant, exclusive G2 partnership, where Washington and Beijing sit down, make all the critical global decisions, and leave everyone else out in the cold. They want stability, for sure, but they also want to maintain their own regional autonomy.
And that leaves us with this final, provocative thought to chew on. What would a Goldilocks U.S.-China relationship actually look like for the rest of the world? Is it even remotely possible for two superpowers with such vastly different goals, competing for absolute dominance in AI, military strength, and global trade, to find a perfect, stable middle ground? Or is that Thucydides' trap ultimately unavoidable? It is truly the defining question of our time, and the outcomes of this 2026 Beijing summit are going to give us our best hint yet at the answer. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.